Welcome everybody to MTSS for Educational Technicians. My name is Andrea Logan and I joined the Department of Ed in November of 2019. And I came from 17 years working in a variety of roles within education. I started right out of my very first, when I finished my first degree in linguistics, I actually worked as a behavior analyst technician for children with pervasive developmental disorders at the Mary Meeting Center for Child Development in Bath when they were a Mary Meeting Center for Child Development and they were a standalone special purpose private school. And I worked one-on-one with kids and I did language development with them. So I basically worked in the speech and language department and I worked on communication with children with pervasive developmental disorders. After about 3 years, I realized that I wanted to continue on my journey. I didn't feel like that was going to be the end for me. And so I decided that I was going to get my master's in education. And so I went into a master's degree for teaching and learning. And I completed that in 2008. And then I went into the classroom as, what I should say is I completed both a regular and special education certificate. And since then, I have held a variety of roles, everything from regular education, 4th and 5th grade, to special education, 7th and 8th grade, and most things in between. I've been an ed tech myself. In fact, I worked as an ed tech while I was getting my master's. I also worked as a sub for 1 year while I was working on my master's because I actually wound up my son was due to be born and halfway through my master's degree. And so in order to lighten the load, I worked as a sub. And so I like to think that my varied experiences within education has helped to give me a well-rounded view about some of the challenges that folks face at a multitude of levels within the school. When I went to my MTSS interview, one of the things that I said to the interview committee was, I feel like everything that I've done in my life in the last 17 years has prepared me for this because I have lived within multiple levels of the education system over the course of the last 17 years. And so hopefully that experience will prepare me for this. And I think that it has. And so today, what we're going to do is we are going to start with a general overview of MTSS. We're going to break down some of the terminology. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership and kind of the backroom systems or the back office systems of MTSS. We're going to talk a little bit about why and how educational technicians really are. You're like, if you think of a system, and I'm thinking gears and cogs and conveyor belts, the gears and the conveyor belts, they can't run without ed techs. It's like school secretaries, you might be the ones that sometimes feel like, well, I'm just the ed tech, but without you, the system doesn't work, right? And so when it comes to providing multi-levels of support for our most vulnerable students, we couldn't do that without educational technicians. And so I really this is going to be an overview of kind of how we at the department see your role in multi-tiered systems of support, and then we'll talk about what the next steps are going to be. So it should be just about an hour, well, actually not an hour. It's about 30 minutes of content because, of course, the first time we're doing introductions. So what I really wanted to do is I wanted to start out with a quick 3-minute video put out by the Swift Center. And for those of you that ever just find yourself with not enough to do, and I'm sure that that's not the case very often, but if you ever did find yourself with not enough to do, you could Google Swift Center, and there is a multitude of resources for MTSS at that Swift Center website. And I would recommend that you do that, and I can drop that link in the chat perhaps while you are taking a look at this MTSS additional support video. Here we go.
MTSS, one system of support for all students. What is additional support? When a school uses a multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS, all students achieve better academic and behavior outcomes. MTSS efficiently matches measured student needs with evidence-based practices for teaching and learning. Schools rethink how to use their space, personnel, materials, and schedules so that all students can learn together within the core curriculum and with high-quality instruction. MTSS proactively looks for those students who are most likely to need more or different instruction and provides it through the system's second tier. To identify students who may need additional support, the school periodically assesses all students on key performance indicators that are able to predict the need for more support. This process is known as universal screening. Valid and reliable screening tools provide data and decision rules to predict which students might need more help with reading, math, behavior, and social-emotional learning. Only a small portion of students need more than what universal support provides. Additional support uses evidence-based interventions to meet the needs for these students. The interventions are targeted to specific skills, often provided in small groups for high efficiency, and are expected to produce a rapid student response. This level of intervention occurs seamlessly within the natural flow of the classroom and school. Additional support also includes progress monitoring. Students receive additional support only as long as needed. Teachers routinely measure student learning and behavior, and when the data shows the student meeting outcomes, teachers withdraw the additional support because it is no longer needed. If a student does not make sufficient progress with the additional support, a school or grade level team engages in data-based decision-making to determine whether to provide intensified support, the third tier of MTSS. Because of this fluid movement among tiers, any student can get what they need, when they need it, and for as long as they need it to achieve their academic and behavioral goals. Learn more about MTSS and SWIFT at www.swiftschools.org.
Okay, so moving along with MTSS overview. In the state of Maine, we have started to define multi-tiered systems of supports, and we've really narrowed down 5 critical components of the MTSS framework. And these 5 essential components are strong team leadership, data-based problem solving, is a layered continuum of supports, evidence-based practices, and school and community partnerships. I've dropped those in the chat. Yep, Laura, those are actually all in the chat. So strong team leadership, data-based problem solving, a layered continuum of supports, evidence-based practices, and school and community partnerships. These are the 5 pillars or the 5 components of a strong MTSS framework. And so taking a look or thinking about those 5 things, I want you to reflect for just a moment, which of those 5 components do you think you have the most prominent role in as an ed tech? So maybe just reflect for just a moment, which of these, and you can see them in the chat, which of these do you think is the one that you have the most prominent role in as an educational technician? And feel free to unmute yourself to just maybe offer out. Yep, and the chat is a great place too. Yep, team leadership and school and community partnerships, layered continuum of supports. We have an evidence-based practices. Ooh, we have one that thinks that they're a part of all of them. I would agree, Patricia, that you are part of all of them. Yes, 2, 3, and 4. Yep, all of them, depending on the students. A lot of 3s, a lot of layers of supports. Yeah, I would say that probably if we were to reorder these, there's definitely going to be, you know, that maybe one is going to be more prominent depending on your role. If you have a different role than somebody else, then you're going to play a different prominent role. But you do need all of them. You are part of all of them for the success of the students that are in your school. So you're absolutely right. Now, layering of supports starts with a universal layer of support, right? And so that's what all students get. And then we layer on services and supports when they aren't responding to the universal layer of support. And then from there, we can layer on even more supports and services, all other supports and services, depending on how the student is responding to the different levels of support that you are giving them. So, oh, there we go. So I'm just an ed tech. Well, what can I do? I'm just an ed tech. Well, like we said earlier in the introduction, just an ed tech is I really want you to take the word just out of there. I am an ed tech, and I am the grease that makes these wheels turn. I am the grease that makes that creates a fluid atmosphere for my kids. I am a support team for a teacher that has an overwhelmingly large classroom this year, or a teacher that has an overwhelmingly challenging mix of students with various levels of need, whether that be academic, behavioral, social, emotional. So you are the grease that pulls these systems together. And so as the grease, you really should hopefully feel empowered to be able to ask questions and be a prominent member of that leadership role, because you are the eyes and ears of what's happening around in the building. You're the eyes and ears of what's happening on the playground, in the lunchroom. You are the eyes and ears of what's happening before school, after school, in the classrooms, and you can find patterns, and you can see pockets of need that teachers that are sort of holed up in their island or on their island of their classroom that they might not always be able to see. And so you are such a vital, important piece of this system, because when you're off in the library in a before school setting and you see a especially rough situation happening in the library every single day, you know, the teachers or the principal or the administrators, they're not necessarily going to see that. And so how you're able to communicate what you see and then play a prominent role in the problem-solving process for how to solve that problem, that is really how you help to drive this system of change, right? How to drive this system of support. I had a question in here about how MTSS compares to PBIS. PBIS is an MTSS, really is what it comes down to. So MTSS breaks down to multi-tiered system of support. Basically, all that means is that it's a system that has multiple levels of support depending on a child's specific need at that time. And so PBIS generally starts at the school level or in the classroom level, right? And then you add on supports and layers depending on the different needs behaviorally that those students need. So PBIS itself is an example of an MTSS. It doesn't replace it, it fits within that structure or within that framework, right? And so as we move so you'll have some schools that will say, oh, I'm an RTI school, or I'm a PBIS school, or I'm an SEL school. Well, what MTSS strives to do is to take all of those systems and put them into one system so that we can work fluidly between the elements and the components of each of those multi-tiered systems and find the combination that works not only for your school as a whole, but your classrooms, your attendance, your individual student needs, and so on and so forth, right? So that's how those two things work together. I'm a little bit nervous about the next slide because it is another video, but I am going to attempt it and see what happens. This is a really excellent video that I just had the pleasure of coming across last week that was shared with me through a colleague. And it is probably, I have to say, even after all these years of doing school and being an educator, I was moved by this. It changed the way I thought instantly about my role.
Hi, my name is Shelley Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregates students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be, philosophically, versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we can have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to. The kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with Universal Design for Learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
So, again, you're not just an ed tech, you are an ed tech, and you are helping for us, those of us in the education system, to come in at that curve. When Shelley talks about the 2 pins staring back at her, I mean, those ultimately are the kids that I would say 99% of you are working with on a day-to-day basis. Those are the kids that you know, it's been tricky to reach them and get them what they need so that they're not floundering within this system that they don't feel like they fit in, they don't fit into. And even though we say all day long, all the time, that, you know, we have to teach the way kids learn, we can't expect them to just adapt to the way that we teach. Really and truly, you know, that's not how teachers are generally prepared. And so one of the reasons why there is a need for this level of support through educational technicians is because we often have those 2 pins that are staring back at us. as lead teachers, and we're not sure, we don't have all of the resources, we don't have all the time, we've got 25 other kids looking at us. How often do I hear that? Yes, but what do I do with the 25 other kids that are staring at me? Well, but what about those two, right? I took a philosophy class a couple of months ago, and there was a train track example where, a train is coming down the track, and there's a fork in the track coming up, and on one side of the track, there are 5 people chained to the track. And on the other side of the track, there's only 1 person chained to the track. And you have to make a decision as the conductor of, you can't stop the train. So which do you do? Do you save the many and sacrifice the one? Do you save the one or sacrifice the many? And so a lot of times I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, how do you make the decision about who gets the support and who gets the attention? What we need to do is we need to shift our approach at how we address. We need to plan and teach for those that are outside of the curve, because those that are inside of the curve, they're going to catch up. They're going to come along with us, right? And so your role here is really to help make sure that those 2 pins that are staring at us and saying, but this isn't working for me. You are a vital part of holding those conversations, supporting those kids, helping to problem solve with the teacher, problem solve with the school, and really, really playing a prominent role in really making sure that those kids are the ones that are getting the most level of support, the ones that are really saying, we've got you. We are going to, we should be throwing curveballs every day, not fastballs, and hoping that we can teach those kids that are waiting for the curveball how to hit a fastball. Because if that's not what they're designed to do, if that's not where their strength is, they're going to always feel like they can't play baseball, right? Okay, so tiers 1, 2, and 3. You've probably heard these. You've probably heard and 3. I want to talk a little bit about what it is and what it isn't. So tier 1 is often known as the universal tier. So we talked about that a few minutes ago. The tier that includes your classrooms, your libraries, your lunchrooms, your hallways, the spaces outside of your building, the buses. It includes before school, after school. It includes transitions between classes, right? It's the layering of interventions that every single kid gets, okay? And really it's known as the preventative layer. When you are working with your school, or when you are working within the tier 1 system, you should have a lens of prevention on your glasses, right? We got to put a lens of prevention. Every single decision that we make should be with the intention that we are actually trying to prevent any child from having to stare back at you because it's not working, right? Now, we're not always going to be able to do that, but when we are designing the tier 1 level, that's the place that we need to be working from. It's that preventative level. All students get things in tier 1, okay? That's why we really need to look at the preventative nature of this and really provide support in asking the right questions to help make sure that the systems are preventative. And I would say that that's one of your roles as an ed tech. If you're sitting in a PLC meeting, if you've been invited to a PLC, or you're invited to a student support team meeting or an MTSS team meeting, and you don't hear anything in the conversations that are happening that really kind of give you that sense that we're not protecting all of the students that might be in the room, it's most likely not negligence on the part of the MTSS team or the student support team. It's really that, school is set up, like we were saying, to shoot for the head pin, right? And once you get that in motion, it can be really hard to stop that momentum, right? And so you're almost kind of like, one of your roles is to learn how to interject and ask questions to help guide that preventative nature of the universal tier 1. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the problem solving process. I think it was webinar 2 that I wanted to do that in. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that at a later time. Now, tier 2, many people feel or understand tier 2 to be something separate from tier 1. So that's when we start pulling kids out of classrooms, or we start saying, well, that reading program is not working for them. Let's do this instead, or let's see if we can't. So tier 2 is, and is it gets kind of muddy at the tier 2 level, because what really sometimes is missed at this level is those students that are needing tier 2 interventions. What they're needing is all of that preventative stuff that they were getting in tier 1, and they need an increased intensity to help support an area of need, right? And so what increased intensity means is they need maybe a little bit more time, but they also are most likely going to need a narrowed focus as well. So let's say that we're talking about a writing activity, right? And so the tier 1 is set up for a writing workshop. And, Tommy, Sally, and Andrew are not doing so well with the writing workshop for a multitude of reasons. We don't want to take writing workshop away from them. We want to find out exactly where the area of need is in the writing workshop, and then figure out how we're going to adapt that within that tier 1 as well. So tier 2 is actually 1 and something else added to it to make it into a tier 2. It's a layering system, not a supplemental system. And the same holds true for tier 3. So if you hear of a student that is tier 3, how many of you, and I can't see you right now because again, my screen, this webinar is going to be edited vastly. But how many of you have ever considered tier 3 special education? And you can just drop it in the chat if you want to. But if you consider tier 3 to be special education, I'm here to tell you that it's not. Special education actually is something that is part of tier 1, 2, and 3. It weaves in and out and is embedded. And even those students that are receiving special education services should also be receiving the preventative measures of the tiers 1, 2, and 3, depending on their areas of need. Some people even call special education tier 4, right? Because they still, we want students to understand that even if you are identified as a special education student, you're a student that really needs specially designed instruction, whether it be behaviorally or academically. You are still part of that multi-tiered system of support. We have not removed you from your peers. We have not removed you from the overall system of supports. We're just going to make sure that we're just going to work that much harder to make sure that you are going to get the supports that you need, but we're not going to take you away from the activities because you need X, Y, and Z. We understand that you need X, Y, and Z, and we're going to do the best that we can to make sure that you get that and that you get the same experience that your peers are getting. Now, another misconception is that kids have to fail before they can get into tiers 2 or tier 3 or even the proverbial tier 4 of special education, and that's not true either. Though sometimes I think that some of you might be willing to argue that yes, that does happen in your school. Whether it's latent or whether it's obvious or not, but that's not the intention. And as MTSS continues to build and grow in the state of Maine, I think that you'll be finding that happens less and less, because we are going to start to shift our focus as a state. We're going to start to shift our focus as a collective unit to making sure that kids that we know need tier 3 supports to survive a writing class, for example, we're going to go ahead and build those in. You'll notice there's an up and down arrow that's in yellow. Kids do not have to start in tier 1 and only move up the system. They might come to you as a tier 3 kid. They might come to you as a tier 4 kid. They might come to you as a kid that needs intervention, and once you've given them what they need and they have been able to grow and mature through that, what we want for them is to move back down the system. It's not just a one-way street. And I think in some ways, many of you have witnessed that it looks like it's a one-way street. Once a student gets identified as tier 2, and then especially once a student gets identified as tier 3, yes, sometimes those conversations of what do we need to do? Do we need to do a special education referral? What is going to be the next step for us? Yes, that does happen, but that's not the way that we really want it to work when it's working at its absolute most efficient way. So one thing that you'll notice here is I did not use the traditional RTI triangle that you're probably used to seeing. The RTI triangle that starts out green and then moves to yellow and then moves to red. Sorry about that. Well, you'll notice I have not used the traditional RTI triangle that goes from green to yellow to red. And the reason for that is, as the MTSS specialist for the state of Maine, it is one of my absolute passions to move away from that triangle. I want to move away from that triangle because it really does foster that upward motion. And really, because MTSS is a layering of supports, it's not a tiered system that you step out of. And I hate that when you look at the green and then you look at the yellow, it really is stepping up into another layer or another floor or another area of the school or area of the building. And I just don't like the visual. So you'll notice on the side here, I've used a collection of colors that all blend together. It's very subtle, but if preventative is the blue layer, and then I add red to blue, what color do I get? I get purple, right? And so tier 2 is really more of a purple. I started out as blue, but I needed to add a little bit of red. And so now the services that I'm getting, those are purple. I'm still getting blue like everybody else, but I also need red in order to be able to do my best and to be the best student that I can be. But then and so kids can fluctuate between purple and blue. And the idea is to remove the red at some point and just keep them back in that purple blue or that blue state. But then occasionally you have kids that need to move up into that tier. They need to move up into tier 3. And so I got to add another layer. So in this case, I'm going to add like a real bright pink, right? A real bright pink. And now if you look at the very top pink, that's a little bit deeper pink. It's because I've added the bright pink to the purple and I've made more of a fuchsia. But underneath that fuchsia is still purple and still blue. I haven't taken them away because I can't get fuchsia if I don't have purple and blue. And so, but I can get red without adding green and yellow, right? I just don't like the visual of that. And so you'll see that I like to move away from that. Because it really hammers home the idea of the layering. One other thing about the layering, and I know that my mind thinks in pictures a lot of times, and so metaphorically, I like to use a blanket analogy, but because I'm sick of winter and I'm sick of the cold, I'm going to use a summer analogy this time, a metaphor. So here we go. You are taking a group of students to the beach, right? And so you've got 25 kids and you're taking them to the beach for an outing. And the preventative layer, taking these kids to the beach, in order to protect them from the sun is sunscreen, right? Every single kid is gonna get sunscreen. You built sunscreen into your budget, you brought bottles and bottles of sunscreen, and every kid is gonna have all the sunscreen that they need. We're not even going to assume that some of the kids got sunscreen at home from mom and dad. It is there, it's available to them. It is a preventative measure to prevent sunburn at the beach. But Sally went to the beach with mom and dad yesterday. And she kept forgetting to put sunscreen on, even though mom kept telling her to put sunscreen on. And she has a really gnarly bruise, like sunburn rather, on her shoulders. And you're worried you're worried that sunscreen at this point is really not going to be enough protection for her shoulders. And you were prepared and you thought, you know, I really ought to make sure that either kids bring an extra t-shirt or a rash guard or something that they can put over their shoulders just in case they get a little bit too much sun. And it turns out that Sally needs this before the day has even started. And so you pull out a t-shirt and you say, Sally, I really think that you're going to need to put this t-shirt on because I'm worried about the sunburn on your back and on your shoulders. And so you're gonna offer her this t-shirt to wear. But here's the thing. You're not going to take her sunscreen away from her legs and her arms and her face just to give her the t-shirt. You're going to keep the sunscreen and you're going to layer on the t-shirt as well so that she is doubly protected from the sun. But there's more, because Sally didn't even want to come to the beach with her friends today or with her classmates today, because the last time she came to the beach, kids were throwing sand. And it was really hard to get the kids to stop throwing sand. And she had a miserable time because sand kept getting in her eyes. And just last week, she got her brand new contacts. And her doctor has said that she really shouldn't wear her contacts to the beach because she might get sand in her eyes. But because she was so ready to get rid of her glasses, she wore her contacts today. She went against the advice of the doctor and she wore her contacts. But now she's really, really, really worried that she's going to get sun in her eyes. So she needs even more response in order to be able to have a good day at the beach. She needs sunglasses. And she can't find hers, but maybe a peer has some, or you have some, or maybe you thought of that as you were thinking of all the different needs that these kids were going to have. Because that's one of the things that I think that ed techs do really well, is they're really good at anticipating what a particular kid's needs are. You have the ability, you're like the people that have the bag that has, like, anybody have a rubber band? You know, you're at the library and you're like, oh yeah, I have one of those. I knew to bring a rubber band. And so you offer Sally a pair of sunglasses. And so you haven't taken away her sunscreen, you haven't taken away her t-shirt, but you've given her sunscreen, you've given her a t-shirt, and now she has sunglasses. And now she looks different from all the other kids at the beach, but she has what she needs to be able to enjoy a day at the beach with her peers. Everybody got what they needed to make sure that they had a successful and fulfilling day. Now next year, maybe Sally will be willing to wear her glasses and she won't need the sunglasses. That's fine. Maybe next year she won't have a sunburn and all she's gonna need is that sunscreen to be protected like her peers. That's what we want. We wanna be able to provide the needs when she needs them, so that eventually she doesn't need them anymore and she can just be part of that preventative layer. And so that's my metaphor, really, for thinking of the layering system that we do in an MTSS. It's not climbing a ladder. It's not moving up an elevator. It's really responding to specific needs. And we do the best that we can to respond as many times as we can and in as many ways as we can to meet the needs of those kids. MTSS is not louder, longer. It's what do you need, and then working towards providing a different response to something that is a specific need for an individual kid. Okay. So we are at about 4 minutes left in today's webinar. That's a lot of information to really kind of chew over and to think about. But what I would invite you to do before next week's offering, and next week we are going to talk about the problem solving process. So week 2 of the MTSS series is going to be looking at the problem solving process. And the problem solving process is the one that the leadership team uses to help make decisions and help navigate through those tiers. And you play a really big role in that. What I would invite you to do between now and then is find a journal. You could use an online journal, you could use Google Docs, you could find a notebook in your house. There's even a system, sorry, a service online called 750 words, and it's like a word processor. You can just type your words in, it tracks you the number of the words. What I would suggest that you do is maybe reflect on a time when you were working with a student, and I want you to assess what you know about that student and think about the services that that student is getting that you know of, right? And I want you to really I want you to think about tier 1, that preventative tier. What are they getting that everybody is getting? What are the potential tier 2 services that they're also getting? And then maybe what are the potential tier 3 services that that child is also getting? And try to reflect and ask, how would you navigate that child between those tiers? How would you do the layering with that child? Maybe think of how it's already being done. And then maybe what would you do to change it based on what you know now? And it's okay to think pie in the sky. It's okay if, like, imagine that you have all the resources in the world, and this is what you would do with all the resources. Don't let the, well, my school doesn't have this and we don't have that and we can't do this. Try to move that out of your brain. Just once, try to move that out of your brain and try to think of the universal power that MTSS is designed to give us. Because the more that we can try to live within that power, the more passionate we're going to be to fight for those things that we're going to try to fight for and that we want to get for our kids as we move forward, right? So as best as you can, try to move away from the can'ts and live in the world of the I woulds or I wills, or this is what I want to shoot for, like pie in the sky. Okay, my friends, I did have one question, a couple of questions pop up. There's a lot in the chat, so there's no way that I'm going to be able to get, yes, the Mary Poppins bag, Liz, the Mary Poppins bag. I almost said diaper bag, but then my filter kicked in, but it's like the Mary Poppins bag. It's like, you know, I've been that mom before. I've been that teacher before. I think it was, we were camping and I don't know what it was that I needed. We were camping and we needed something and it was the most random thing. Oh, we were cooking tinfoil dinners and I said off the whim what I wouldn't give for some cayenne pepper. And one of my friends goes, oh, I have that. And she pulls out a Tic Tac box that had cayenne pepper in it. And she goes, yeah, this was a trick that I learned a long time ago. I always keep little spice boxes in my camping bag. Who knew? Sometimes I feel like as ed tech, like that's kind of the persona. Like you're almost expected to be the one that has the answers, even though nobody thinks to ask you the questions before you're expected to have the answer. And I have a few people on my screen nodding. Okay. The question was, do we need to register for the next session? No. I'm going to say no, but there is a little bit of trepidation in my voice because this is all new to many of us that are doing this. And when I set up your registration link, I set it up, I think, to include all 4 of the sessions. So you should be able to access all 4 of the sessions using the link that you used to get into today's session. My guess is that the sessions will grow because even while we were doing this, I had probably 45 more people that were trying to get in that just weren't getting in. And my heart breaks because I can feel their frustration, but unfortunately there was nothing that I could do. So I'll be reaching out to them, but be looking for this recording. Yeah, rough start, absolutely, but it did get a lot better once I shut the notifications off and the slides stopped sticking. What I will do is I will get this posted just as soon as I can once I have edited out some of the bloopers and made it a little bit more streamlined. I am going to read everything that I can find in the chat and I will write those questions and answers up in a document and I will send them out to everybody that attended so that you'll have those answers and you'll have that for you. But because that's also going to take a little bit of time, please allow me, maybe until Monday morning to get that out to you, if you wouldn't mind. If you don't get something from me by Monday, let me know. But certainly, I can shoot for that. to get your questions answered and your thoughts processed and things like that. All right, folks, I am going to shut my volume off and my camera off. You can leave at your leisure, but I will close the meeting officially in about 3 minutes. Okay? Have a great day and try to soak up some sun if you can find it.
Hi, can I give you a specific example of what I think you're talking about with your layering? This is Rhonda.
Yeah.
Because usually when, as an ed tech, and we're in the classroom, we just follow the lead of the teacher, and that's the way it has to be, discipline-wise. Well, one day I was covering when the teacher had to go to an extended meeting, and there was one of those children that needed the extra support, the extra layers. I came into the classroom, and I know this particular child can't stand a lot of noise. And he walked in, and they were doing math, and he's like, why does it have to be so loud in here? And I just said, I totally agree with so-and-so. It is really too loud to do math in here right now. So would everyone please use your level 5 voice, that's what we call the no voice, use your level 5 voice to go ahead and go on and continue to do your math. And it worked perfect. So I just wanted to share a little success story.
That's perfect. And that's an example, Rhonda, I think, of it was a tier 1 intervention. That was a tier 1 support that you did. So you had one student that needed that, but you offered it to the entire class. So you were able to help meet that child's need without moving them or without giving them something extra. You went with a preventative measure first, and you reached out to the collective whole, which probably helped that child feel way more included than if you had offered them a set of headphones, right? So like you looked at it, you thought about how can I respond to this need? Let's try a whole room approach first. You equalized the playing field for that child that said to you, it's too loud in here. So that's an excellent example of one of those preventative measures and how to apply a preventative measure before starting to hand out t-shirts and headphones and those kinds of things. So yes, awesome, well done. That's great.
Okay, as promised, the next webinar will happen on Tuesday, May 12th at 11 o'clock, followed by Thursday, May 14th at 11 o'clock, and then the following Tuesday as well at 11 o'clock. We'll see you then.